everyone. I'm Lisa Parenteau, and I'd like to welcome you to Lifting Others as We Rise, the podcast where we dive into the world of real estate and the power of positive thinking. In each episode, we're going to bring you inspiring conversations with real estate professionals and other thought leaders who have really harnessed the power of lifting others up along their journeys. So let's get ready to elevate our mindset. Lifting Others as We Rise podcast, where inspiration is a catalyst for action. Let's go. Welcome to Lifting Others as We Rise. I'm your host, Lisa Parenteau, realtor, team leader, CRS, broker associate, but most importantly, Glamma to Eloise Ann, and I live here on beautiful Cape Cod in Massachusetts. I'm thrilled to welcome you to today's episode of our podcast. So get comfy, settle in, whether you're at the gym, turn us up, cup of tea, or just driving. My intention, as always, is to discover inspiration and catalysts for change in the stories of real estate leaders. And today, I'm so excited. My guest is Michael Valdes. So
Hi, Lisa.
hi, Michael. I'm gonna give you a little official intro, but then we can just put that aside if we can. With more than 25 years, I know you started when you were about 25 years of experience and expertise in global real estate and finance. Michael's career has really included transactions in excess of $1 billion, which seems impossible to imagine. Back in the day, now I think things might be a little bit different. But you also serve as the Chief Growth Officer at eXp Realty, which is something that I am super excited about as a brokerage that we share. You were with Realty for a very long time, I think 15 years. And that touches the brands of Century 21, Coldwell, ERA, Sotheby's, Corcoran, everybody who's anybody in the business. But thankfully, as I mentioned, in September of 2020, you and I are both pandemic babies. I came also in 2020. You came to us here at eXp.
I actually came in May of 2020.
Okay, I was February. So we were very close. We were very close
Yeah.
together. And, glancing at your Instagram, I understand that you have been at the Super Bowl with celebrities, and you also, the high point, I'm sure, so far of 24, were in Worcester, Massachusetts with us at our regional rally just 2 weeks ago. So welcome, Michael. I'm so thrilled to have you.
Oh, Lisa, thank you so much for the invitation. I have really enjoyed getting to know you over the years and really your spirit and how you pour into others and really who you are as a person. It's just been a thrill to get to know you better, to form this friendship, and really to support the leadership that you've done throughout your career and in new endeavors like this one. So thank you for having me as a guest.
Yes, no, I'm so excited. We could talk about real estate, and we love to do that as realtors, and we always do that whenever we're together, of course. But the podcast itself, I've continued to try to really ask people, especially very successful leaders, things that, let me just throw one out from the beginning. Can you think of something that happened back whenever it was, a few decades ago, clearly, that really was a catalyst to kind of propel you to the real estate area and where you are today?
Well, I'll give you the catalyst that really comes to mind that was not just in real estate, but in life. And at 25 years old, I was diagnosed with colon cancer. And I went through that experience. And when you're in your 20s, you're not supposed to be tested with your own mortality. And what really happened at that point, and I always say it was the greatest gift. And I'm 57 now, so it was a very long time ago. But what happened from that was that when you're testing your own mortality, you realize that it doesn't matter what other people think, and you need to be true to you. I say it's a gift because to have that lesson in my 20s was extraordinary, because in your 20s, you're still trying to find out who you are. You're still trying to find out what you should be doing. And you're still looking for societal guides, your peer group, to approve of what you're doing. And when you really are tested with, you may not be here tomorrow, you're really look inward and you're saying, you need to just have your own moral compass, make sure that you're doing whatever you should be doing that's right for you without hurting anyone else. And so that served me so well for so long. And the idea that tomorrow is never promised is when you really sort of push on and try to do as much as you can today.
Yeah, for sure. So that was pretty young. Were there mentors even at that point? I mean, real life, like grandma kind of thing, or somebody, for me, Tony Robbins has always been an amazing, amazing source of inspiration and empowerment. So
Yeah.
just curious about if there was someone that spurned that on.
So you mentioned grandma, and my grandmother was actually the most influential person in my life. She died when I was much, much too young. She died when I was 12, but she was a very influential person in my youth. I used to spend every summer with her. She lived in Spain, and it was something that she was a very successful entrepreneur. And looking back is when you start thinking about that. But for me in my more formative years, I think it was interesting because my father was a political prisoner in Cuba, and he was Batista's counsel and was arrested as a political prisoner and was released during the Bay of Pigs in a prisoner exchange program before I was born. So he had a very, very interesting past that he did. And he also was someone that was very driven. But it was really interesting to me because I say that I got to meet my dad at his funeral. And I say that because everyone that he knew that eulogized him told stories that I never knew. And it was something that he kept in a box, right? And, my dad owned a casino in Cuba. And I'm like, wait, what? And it was just like, this is insanity. But part of it was, why didn't you ever share that?
Mm.
The other part was, I guess I had no comparison of knowing how painful it would have been for him to do that. So it was interesting because now I see my life now, and I see that success leaves clues. It was one of those things that almost by hindsight, the most influential was probably my father.
Interesting. So you talked about drive. Was there something in his daily life? Was there something there that was really
Oh
motivating
Lord,
to drive?
it's the idea. I mean, imagine, Lisa, where you're in a country where you're a wealthy family, and everything is taken away from one day to another by the government, and you have no say. And those stories of those contemporaries of my dad that escaped are extraordinary. I met the woman in Los Angeles in my early 20s. Her name was Ophelia Fox, and Ophelia owned the Tropicana in Cuba. And she wrote 3 books about it. She's long passed now, but she wrote 3 books about it, and she was friends with my father. And to know the stories of the people that had to leave then, she was at one point the wealthiest woman in the Caribbean. And she was the first, she had Ava Perón's crown jewels as collateral for a gambling bet. Like the whole thing was so
Sounds like
insane.
a fabulous movie or
Oh
a
my
new Apple
Lord.
series.
It's crazy, right? I mean, to really sort of know about what was going on back then, and then everything is gone. Like she literally left with an hour's notice, and she was one of the wealthiest people in the country. And when you start thinking about those types of things, imagine the idea of drive, right? We sort of say now, oh, I'm driven. I wake up at 5 in the morning and I go to the gym. And sort of like, come on. It's like when you put it in perspective of someone leaving their homeland to a place they don't know, when you were a centimillionaire in Ophelia's case, and you're left with nothing, how do you wake up the next day? What are your choices? And when you start having to live a life that way, when you're thinking in the back of your head, it could be taken away at any time. That's a very intense way of describing drive, right? And I think that there was parts of that in me that were always a part of what I was doing, of trying to overcompensate or overachieve in my career. I was the first Latino director of Deutsche Bank in the United States at the age of 25. I started pushing through and really creating what was different milestones for me. And it wasn't even the idea of ticking a box because it was a goal. It was the idea, and almost, I think about this now at my age, sort of thinking of what drives you. It's the idea of keeping going, and in the back of your mind, knowing that you grew up with those stories. I'm only first generation. So like having those direct stories of it could be taken away at any time is a very intense way to grow up.
Absolutely. And I see, it's interesting that you mention we continue to throw out a couple things that Tony Robbins uses. And I think about you talked about that drive and where does that come from? And I know I share part of it is that significance is the third. Tony talks about six human needs, right? Certainty and
Sure.
uncertainty, but then significance. And when we are seeking significance for whatever our family of origin, our backgrounds, however they brought us to today, unless we start to look at needs 5 and 6, which are growth and contribution, nothing is ever enough because we just feel like we hit a milestone and we go, great, boom, what's next? We
Right.
never celebrate, we never relax. We're always pushed to produce and perform. And that is certainly the same, a lot of the same place for different reasons, but that I also came from. So interesting that someone could either go towards abundance or
Mm.
towards lack in that situation, right? If you're always afraid that it's going to be taken away from you tomorrow, are you squirreling it away everywhere and not willing to share both your time and treasure and talents, right? Versus what I see in you now, which is just so generously giving of your time. I mean, seriously, I'm watching you in these couple of weeks when leadership is going to all of these regional rallies and you go from Worcester, Mass to, I don't know, somewhere, somewhere in Missouri or Kansas or
I
somewhere.
just did Dallas yesterday. It was
Well,
a lot
Dallas
of
is
fun.
kind of a higher profile than Worcester, Mass. Let me just say that. I just mean, you guys, I don't even know if you just go and do because it's part of what we do here, but it's also part of who you are and what you bring today, and that's just beautiful and amazing.
Well, thank you. But, there is a big part of that now, which is, I always talk about this at this point, which is legacy. What do you leave behind? And the why, as you say. It was about 2 years ago, I retitled my trust. So from Valdez Family Trust to Herencia. And Herencia in Spanish means legacy. It was for me a very conscious choice because everything that I own is now relabeled under the trust. So whenever you see a statement come across, or whenever you, especially now last week with like taxes, everything was labeled that, right? So it's a constant reminder of that. And I did it purposefully because of that. So I started my family trust last year. And it's the idea of making sure that whatever you've built was done for a reason. And whatever you are doing and whatever lessons you can share is something that is left behind. This conversation is part of that legacy. Anyone that takes anything from this and makes their life just one day better is all that we can do, and that's well worth it. So this to me is part of it's not the financial, it's only a small part of that. It's what are your learnings that you can give someone else? What is it that you can inspire someone else to do? What is it that you can say to someone for them to realize, you're right, tomorrow isn't promised. I'm not going to wait till next week to go and start this. I'm going to do it today. I'm going to not be afraid to knock on that next door coming back to real estate to get another listing, right? It's all about what is it that you're fearing? And when you break that down, is when you actually are in motion. You mentioned Tony Robbins a few times, and the idea of emotion, right? When you look at that word, the E in that word are all of our excuses. And when you get rid of your excuses, the only thing left in that word is motion.
Oh, I love that.
It's so true.
I love that. And it is so
Right?
true. Oh my God.
And
Yeah.
so,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
because we always say, oh, so and so is emotional, right? It's sort of like, okay, let's break that down. So the E in emotion is literally all the excuses that we give ourselves, as valid as they may be, that we give ourselves for not having motion. The moment that you erase the excuses, all that's left is for you to propel. All that's left is motion.
Yeah, I love that. And you're speaking to me right now for something I'm going through. So I appreciate that. I
You're
really
the one that I was going to help today. See?
there you go. No, I think when you look at those spheres, as you say, and they continue to change and crop up and evolve and evolve. And I'm so aware of the stories we tell ourselves, especially us good salespeople. Oh my God, we could just lie to ourselves and tell us these
Yes.
fabulous stories with icing and sprinkles and all this, but it's really just about some underlying fear. I don't feel like
Or
I'm going to be rejected or
sure,
someone's not going to love me or think not very highly of me. And you mentioned that from 25 on, at
yeah.
least for the most part, you thought, you know what? I'm not going to care so much about what others think of me.
It's
And
not my responsibility. I can't do anything about it. It's not my responsibility. I can only care about what I think about myself and what I can change about myself. So that's the only thing that matters. And it sounds selfish, but it's actually selfless. When you actually do not care about what other people are going to think about you, and you just said, am I concerned about this? And that's what's holding me back. Do you see the disservice you're doing to yourself? You're holding yourself back based on what other people may think of you. And that whole narrative is in your own head.
I mean, all of the emergencies are so overblown in our fearful minds of what may or may not happen. It's hysterical. There's a great quote. I don't know what the heck it is, but of all of the millions of problems that I thought I had, 0.0 of them actually came true because none of those crazy scenarios in my mind were even closely true. No, that's such a great way to look at things also. And in terms of looking at how you feel now about success and what are the measures of that? I read somewhere, one of your quotes somewhere said that success is a math problem. And I thought, well, that's an interesting perspective. Just wondering, is
Well,
that still like, tell me where you are in your life and your
sure.
career? What does success mean?
Yeah, I'm going to go back to the quote that you said, because when I said success is a math problem, it is shocking to me when we're talking about real estate, the industry that we're both in, how many people do not have a business plan when they think about their own business, right? When you say to somebody, what did you do last year? Oh, I sold 12 homes. Okay, how much did you make? I have no idea. And it's like, how's that even possible? It's sort of like, oh, I just gave everything to my accountant. I'm like, well, hold on a second. It's like, none of that makes sense. But I'll tell you, it's scary. It's over 80% of the agent population do not have a business plan. And when you think of that, you think you're an independent contractor. You're the CEO of your own company, whether you're a solo agent or team lead or whatever else you're doing. And when you start thinking about the quote that was related to that success is a math problem, you say, how much money do you want to make a year? $250,000. Great. Let's break that down. How many sales does that sort of constitute in your area? What's your average sales price? All right, fantastic. So how many sales do you need to do? And you break it down to the point of, I know that I want to take a vacation with my family. I'm going to be gone 3 weeks in June. Fantastic. So give yourself that grace. I'm going to do the 2 weeks at the end of the year for the holidays with my family. Wonderful. Give yourself that grace. Now, how many weeks do you have left in the year? You start breaking it down. How many listings do I need to go on? How many listing appointments do I need to go on in order for me to do that? What's the average days on market in my market so that I can actually create this plan that makes sense? How will people know me? How many times do I need to post on social? How many events do I need to go to? How do I become the expert in the area? Okay, this is how many articles I need to have out there in a certain month so that people know who I am. And when you break that down, that was the quote that was success is a math problem. I can tell you, if you tell me you want to earn $250,000 or $1 million a year, I can tell you exactly what you need to do for that month, for that week, for that day. That's how easy it is to break it down. But you need to be able to focus on that and be true to yourself. What is the average sales price? What's your market share of the market that you're selling in right now? So that was that equation right now. What I would say that success is now is the freedom to do what you want to do and help as many people, in my case, as I can. So that is how I define success now. It's the ability that if I want to jump on a plane this afternoon and go to Paris, I thankfully have the means to do that. And that's where you want to be in community, you want to be in family. And that is something that's great. Right now, you talked about Tony Robbins, but Jared Robbins always talked about the first mountain is what you do for you to build your career. The second mountain is what you climb to look back at the first and figure out what you're going to do with those efforts. Right now, trying to get to the peak of the second mountain and trying to figure out what that is. There's a lot of things that are rolling around in my head of things that can be helpful to people. I very much have a great interest in helping the youth of not only our world and society, but really globally that may not have the means. And maybe there's a lot of challenges with the orphanage system and the foster care system in our society where, you know, children phase out, and children that are homeless at 17 and 18 because they phase out of the foster system or orphanage, where do they go? They don't have any skill sets. You know, they become a statistic, they become a liability, they become a story, they become a stat. And what I see is wasted potential.
Absolutely. And if each person isn't cherished as the same piece of God that you and I are, or, you know, I don't want to get too political, but if people are not cherished in that same way universally, that becomes a lot scarier. I just read something recently about an effort to provide reading glasses to communities all over the world, that it improves people's ability and capability to support themselves. There's a lot of people who just can't see. They can't read. I mean, I can't read without, you know, but simple reading glasses, getting those out to super underserved areas. You know, you don't even think about that stuff, taking such things for granted. I
Yeah,
love that you're looking at, because to me, it's that from that second mountain, you're looking
yeah.
back and reaching your hand out to
That,
see.
that's
And
exactly what it is. You know, you said cherish, and I always say, if you don't cherish, you perish.
mm.
And it's so true because we're all responsible for each other.
Yeah, and to remember that, actually, one of your quotes, I did have another quote of yours that I saw, and it was,
Michael is,
yeah, I know. I'm going to put like little captions on the bottom of our podcast. The world is so vast, so let's start thinking about it that way.
oh God, yes, absolutely. You know, the internet made it right. We can get anything we want in the world. I mean, just think about the fact that we don't really think about going shopping because it shows up in our doorstep. It could be anywhere in the world. So when you start thinking about the world is vast, you know, and you need to start thinking globally because we're affected in that manner, right? It is part of that. We're all part of one race, which is the human race. And we're all part of that whole world. And it's amazing. I've traveled over 100 countries in my career. And when you start thinking of it's the greatest university that ever existed in the world, and it's travel. And when you start looking at other folks and look at other cultures and understand others' points of view, you become a more whole person because we can all go. There's, you know, it's amazing to me, Lisa. Think about this. We all go to the movie theater and we all watch the same movie. And you walk out and we'll have 300 different opinions. And it's sort of like, well, wait, how could that even be possible? You all saw the same movie. We all see everything from our own lens. And it's only until our lens is widened by seeing other people's perspective is when your own lens widens. And then you see that same movie in a different perspective. How many times have we seen a movie and then we go and see it again? And I'm like, oh, I never got that the first time.
Never saw that. When did they slip that
Like,
in? Yeah.
how did that put it right? It's like the movie didn't change,
Yeah.
your perspective changed.
Yeah, no, it's funny. We on the Massachusetts meeting this morning, there was, I think, I don't know, 170, 180 something people on the meeting, and there were 180 different interpretations of the current on the one form, on the single property buyer form. Anyway, I digress. But yeah, I think you are correct. And when we're willing to say, you know, a couple, I don't know when it was, a few years ago, I just got the thought that everybody believes they're right. And if you can just kind of get your head around that, and give people as much space as they need to have their own lens and their own opinion. Maybe it changes yours a little bit, but it certainly widens yours. And I love the fact that you said that, because there's so people there's a scary part of kind of the normalization of some things today, but there's also that, people feel really very free to completely express themselves, whatever that may show up as.
Very true,
So
actually.
yes, so we have more opportunity to 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 remind ourselves that everybody believes they're right, and they have, as long as they're not hurting others.
But there's also that thing of it doesn't have to be right or wrong,
Mm.
right? Everyone just has their own lens. So when you come together with someone that has an opposing lens, it's not right or wrong. It's just different. Somebody has a different view because they're seeing it from the seat that they're sitting in, right? And unless you change seats, you can't see their perspective.
Yeah, for sure. And that's an incredibly important skill in leadership. I know that you bring that forward. You have people that would literally throw themselves in front of a bus for you. And I looked at one of your one of your mentors that was out on the road with you this week, and what a bright light that gentleman is. And I can see that you get a lot of, I could just see how it was very sweet watching your interaction and kind of beaming, as he was put mid stage and is stepping into a role that he's being groomed for.
I think in leadership, the only true definition of leadership is lifting others into leadership. That's the only role that you have as a leader, is to make sure that you cultivate other leaders, because then it's a perpetual, right? And it's like, that's my only job. It's my only job is to elevate others into leadership. And so I see my team as their coach, not their boss. I'm their coach, and I'm there to guide them, to help them, and to really be able to touch as many people as possible. Lisa, when we look at growth and we start looking at, our agent count, for example, in my growth meetings, I don't talk about how many agents we've added. We talk about how many lives that we touch, because there's a different perspective when you start using different language and when you start looking at it in that manner. When we talked about, we just had an incredible accomplishment last week where we were named #1 by number of transactions in the industry. And didn't say it that way. We said we help the largest numbers of families get into their homes. It's a very different perspective, right? We didn't say we sold more than anyone else. We helped the largest number of families find their homes.
Yeah, I love that. The new luxury buyer presentation, my assistant just finished customizing it, and that's what it has. The template itself is just number of families. It's not number of what sides or anything. It was really, I loved that.
But think about it. Doesn't it change your perspective? I mean, your face just changed as we were talking about that. It wasn't just, we're #1 in transactions. Who cares? It's like we help the largest number of families find their home.
Yeah, absolutely. Michael, I hate to wrap up our time together. I had all kinds of other juicy questions I wanted to ask you. Maybe I'll just ask one. Share one of your guilty pleasures. It can be not, I mean, PG rated. This is, going to be on Spotify. I know one
I
of
like
mine is, I call it like Bravo and Netflix real estate porn. I just love all those shows. Selling Sunset, the new Buying Beverly Hills with the Yamansky family. Like, I'm all over those things. I love the houses. I love the outfits. I just love everything about it. I watch every single one. But do you have kind of a guilty pleasure that you would love to share with us?
Gosh, it certainly isn't yours.
You've been in so many of those homes. I have not. I only see them on TV.
Oh my gosh, a guilty pleasure.
Mm.
Listen, for me, I actually don't sort of, because again, in my head, if I associate it as a guilty pleasure, it's something I shouldn't be doing. And again, it's like I gave myself that grace a long time ago to do what I enjoy. So listen, I still, at this point in my life, trying to understand that for me to keep up my physique and know that I need to sort of like do what's healthy for me, my guilty pleasure is going to the gym every day.
All right. No matter where you are or what you're doing. I mean, I think,
Yep.
yeah, yeah. And that sets a discipline, which is a whole nother podcast episode for sure. One that I would love to share with you at some point because it's
Sure.
so critical, and a word that people, don't love to talk about. Many folks will love to talk about for sure. But you shared so much. I loved the new definition of success about freedom to really go and do what you want, but also to help others, and bringing Jarek's visual about that second mountaintop and turning around and looking at what that is and how can you reach your hand back out. And also the name of your trust and that kind of word for you that is
Yeah.
a governing word for everything, which is legacy. And I so appreciate that. It's just been a pleasure. It is always a pleasure to spend time with you. We got to spend that really great time in Orlando together and getting to know each other. And I respect you as a leader. I'm just interested in everything that you're up to and that you do. And again, I want to thank you so much for being our guest today on Lifting Others as We Rise. Thanks, Michael.
Lisa, thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us on another amazing episode of Lifting Others as We Rise with today's special guest, Michael Valdes. I hope you will calendar some time this afternoon or tomorrow in the short term to follow through on a couple of catalysts for change that Michael brought up. One of the ones that's going to stick with me for a while is what is the legacy I'm building? He talked about renaming his trust and using the idea of legacy in a lot of his decision making, so that when you think about creating plans, goals, what are your dreams, how is that supporting a legacy that you'd like to leave? So I guess my invitation would be to consider that, no matter what age you are, whether you're in your mid 20s or mid 60s, what does that legacy look like? What would you like to be remembered for and by? And how can you continue to put things together for that today? Michael also mentioned being his authentic self, knowing from a young age, because of the cancer diagnosis and everything that he went through, that you're not guaranteed tomorrow. And so living in today, not being concerned what others think of you, doing the very best you can is one of the pivotal moments in his life. And then lastly, the thing I will continue to remember is he talked about Jarek Robbins, Tony's son, who is the at EXP in Success Enterprise, talking about the first mountain of your career, is your accomplishments and where you are with that piece of your success. But then there's the second mountain to climb, and the second mountain to climb, you get towards the top and you turn around and look back and say, what have I left behind? What can I do differently? And who can I reach my hand out to now and pull them up with me, which just underlies completely the theme of our podcast, Lifting Others as We Rise. So if you enjoyed today's insights, please be sure to subscribe, rate, and leave a review. Your feedback really matters. Until the next episode, keep the positivity flowing. And remember, when we make an effort to lift others up with intention, we all rise together. This is Lisa Parenteau signing off from Lifting Others as We Rise. Take good care.